It's not just a kind of outside-in view. It's a source of truth for the enterprise. And then you've got an AI assistant that can help you look at all those issues across the entire value chain.
Before we get started with the show, here's a quick word from our sponsor, Global Training Center. As trade compliance professionals, you want to make sure that your procedures and documentation are completed as correctly as possible to avoid any delays and possible fines. We provide a range of trade compliance courses that will fit your needs. From in-person or web training to recorded on-demand courses, we can train one or even thousands on your team through your learning platform or on our portal. We can even customize a private session for your team. Go to globaltrainingcenter.com to find out more.
Hey, folks, we're in for another great show on the SimplyTrade podcast, and this is going to be a good discussion today. This is one of those that I will tell you that we're going to get to talk about AI or artificial intelligence. And listen, folks, I need all the help I can get because I'm dumb as a box of rocks. But this is going to be one of those things that hopefully a system will help compensate for my shortfalls. All that to say, Lala, I'm excited about today's show. But what do you think? What is like with the AI, and everybody's been talking about all this conceptual stuff, and we've seen it in the conferences of late. Teeing this one up is going to be a great show, I think.
Well, for me, I'm excited also because it's like a nice in Mexico or probably anywhere else. There's a bowl of soup that you can buy called Siete Mares. Siete Mares means it has
whatever that is.
Everything. It has everything. Octopus, and it has like any kind of seafood you can find. It's like everything but the kitchen sink goes in there. So this show might be like that only because we have AI, we have forced labor, we have supply chain resiliency. I mean, we have all this really cool stuff mixed in there, and then plus we have two really cool dudes to talk to us about that too. So which is really cool, and I'm really excited because we're bringing back a favorite on the show that had a great hit at the beginning of this year. He kicked off the year for us this year, which was cool.
Our first program for this year, folks. Yeah. So this is going to be a good one here. So, well, let me introduce our guest. So, folks, as we just talked about, Alan Bersin, he's former commissioner of customs, and again, I always screw this up, but you know me, my memory's as long as a turtle's tail here, Alan. I think you were was it the associate or secretary of the Department of Homeland Affairs, whatever it is, DHS?
So the assistant secretary of policy and international affairs at DHS. But there were two or three other titles, though, Andy. So you're basically circling in.
Okay. Well, the one that it's just, and where you and I had the interaction was when you were with customs. And I got to say, folks, if you go back in history and you look at it, Alan Bersin, in my opinion, was the leader that broke through a lot of the bureaucratic stagnation of customs to get the development of ACE on its way, getting a lot of other things going. He's a great visionary. I have a lot of respect for him. And with that, to me, it was just a phenomenal time. But with that, he's joined forces with a company called Altana, and we have the CEO, a guy by the name of Evan Smith. And, with all due respect, Evan, you look pretty young here. You definitely are.
He just graduated from college, I think.
Yeah, it's just like he's wet behind the ears, it looks like. But your background is, oh my gosh, Evan, you have really done some phenomenal stuff. You must be one creative dude, I guess.
Altana is his current master's degree. What is it, thesis or theory? He's trying to prove something, I guess, because he looks super young. Look at him.
And Lalo, it's so good you've invited Evan, and of course he's younger than we are because he's closer to where the world is today. But here's a man who not only understands where the world is going, but has built an institution and is now trying to manage a process to actually bring the benefits of what three of us have spent a lot of time on thinking about, but Evan's in the process of doing it. And in terms of wet behind the ears, Andy, I wouldn't sit down at a poker table with this man.
I love it. He's probably, or even a chess match, he's probably like 2-3 steps ahead of you. You got everything. Evan, welcome to the show, my friend.
I'm excited to be here. This is going to be fun.
Oh, it's always a good discussion and whatnot. So, all right, with that, we're going to jump right in, folks. I'm telling you, this is going to be a show you need to make point of downloading and look at it, record back to or refer back to it. Man, I'm telling you what. My tongue is all tied up today, and I don't know why. And maybe I'm giddy as a filly on a spring morning to try and get you guys on here. So here we go. With all the things going on, AI technology, and from a strategic perspective, I know the government has been incorporating, and I say government more specifically, U.S. Customs. I would love to know a little bit too, are the other agencies utilizing some AI technology when it comes to processing international trade shipments, and all of that. So strategically on that, Alan, let me just ask this, what seems to be going on right now as far as AI technology, and is it with the incorporation of that from customs and the agencies? Is there really a true positive impact, or is it like, oh crap, this is another system that got developed and we don't know what to do with it?
Yeah, we're just at the outset of this. This is similar to being Vasco da Gama in the age of exploration, or Gutenberg in the invention of the printing press. We just have put our toe into this. And are learning about it. And like everything else in the world, Andy, we're in a topsy-turvy world, not always bad, but it's a time of huge transformation. And what that means for government agencies, but also for the private sector, is that there's a mismatch between perception, implementation, capacity, and the like. So, we did, as we've traced on the show, and you have, we built the most advanced border management system in the world here in the United States. It was emulated in much of the rest of the world, starting in the EU. But the pace of change is so great that we find ourselves now overtaken by events, in the sense that the system is not up for the challenges that currently confront it. So remember, over the last generation, we built an extraordinary system to counter terrorism in international trade and travel. And we built in a regime of basically relying on three elements: advanced information, risk management, and traffic segmentation, or adjustment to what the risk signal was. All of that, knock on wood, kept us from another 9/11. And although we didn't avoid terrorist events, it was managed well. But today, we're in a different situation. To manage terrorism, we were dealing with what we called colloquially, needles in haystacks, making haystacks smaller so that we could manage the flow more effectively. All of these concepts actually are still at play in today's world, but the challenges that we face, the idea that in addition to non-state actors, we have to be on the lookout, and narcotics, we have to be on the lookout for forced labor, carbon imprints, Russian sanctions, Chinese tariffs, and the like. And we've got to move from looking for needles in haystacks, which most of the agencies are still doing on the 9/11 model, to being able to examine every piece of straw. And to have the scale and the capacity to do that is exactly the problem that we set out, that Evan and his colleagues conceived, and that we've set out to solve in the context of Altana. Those challenges will define the application of artificial intelligence and machine learning to the problem. And I suspect, as always, the government will lag behind. But as we get into the call, I think you'll see Evan has some brilliant insights on how this is going to unfold.
So with the way things are looking at, I mean, traditionally, and let's just say the 9/11 model you were talking about is that traditionally you have now advanced information that's coming in from manifest. And in particular, the air express, air cargo side of things is one of the first modes of transportation that we're supplying so much information. Other modes are getting there and all that. So you have these massive data elements of manifest. trying to scrutinize all that. And you would have a series of, customs officers, inspectors, whatever their titles may be, as they're perusing all that, trying to say, okay, I want to look at this one or whatever. But as you said it, looking for that needle in a haystack. And that is just a overwhelming thing. Utilizing AI technology, is that something that is in today's world allowing customs to be more, shall we say, productive in an element of getting some of the standard stuff out of the way, looks like it's legitimate, and flagging things, as well as allowing then the customs inspector to apply their expertise on things they should be looking for?
It is, but it's being done in a different way. And let me defer to Evan to describe how, for example, we're dealing with CBP and other agencies around the world to deal with it. Same structure, but it's more different than it is alike at end.
Yeah, I'll set a little bit of the scene from a policy standpoint. I mean, Alan kind of took us through the arc of risk targeting for those needles in the haystack, and the whole kind of border management and trade facilitation, trusted trader regime has really been built up around the idea that there are secure, trusted traders, right? And that's been the public-private cooperation on the border. The way that the policy landscape has moved is, whether it's a sanction issue, whether it's Chinese tariffs, whether it's forced labor, whether it's the carbon border adjustment in Europe, the way the policy is all going is the thing that matters and is being scrutinized now is the nature of the goods inside the container and the value chain associated with those goods. So that whole multi-tier network of the value chain of those goods. And that's where the forced labor issues are coming about. That's where the carbon intensity needs to get, calculated and measured. So these are all value chain shaped problems. Now, as it relates to that sort of public-private model, the imperative and the opportunity now is to say, with artificial intelligence and with this proliferation of data, can we start to go beyond good guys and bad guys and, security audits basically for AEO or CTPAT and start to examine the nature of the goods and predict those entire value chains and then determine the compliance profile of those value chains in a cooperative model.
Is this a way for, as you're going down this road, and I can see so many great applications of this, the good corporate citizens, the good importers, that if they've provided all of the good data, if you will, the accurate data, the things that they need, the descriptions there, their entry is synchronized with their manifest data and the bill of lading data and all that. All those kinds of things start coming into play in the trusted trader profiles now. If that is looked at, then it would be a case where if AI is being utilized based on what you're saying there, is allowing the facilitation of trade for the good corporate citizens. And again, getting that out of the way so that, and that would be, as Alan was saying, lots of the strains of straw, if you will, that gets that out of the way so that now you can start flagging, hey, this needs a little bit more scrutiny.
Yeah, it takes you to a world where, to keep the metaphor going, you're qualifying the entire haystack as opposed to trying to pick needles out of the haystack. So with AI and with this data availability, you can look not only at the traders and who they are and, good guys, bad guys, that kind of thing, but you can actually predict the nature of the goods inside of the box and the value chain networks associated with those goods, screen them for forced labor, predict the carbon intensity, look for sanctions deep in the supply chain or value chain network. And you can do all that at scale. And so whether you're on the enforcement side of things, your mission, of course, is to enforce and facilitate. And the policy that's being handed down from governments is obligating customs authorities to scrutinize these entire global value chain networks right? So they're overwhelmed. Now, on the compliance side of it with the trade, the imperative is I've got to somehow reach beyond my direct suppliers, my suppliers, my tier 3, my tier 4, my tier 5, and I've got to somehow build up a compliance attestation in order to be eligible under this free trade agreement, or to be compliant under the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, or to provide a admissibility package when my goods have been detained.
Excuse me, Evan. So I think you hit it, Andy, when you asked, are we going beyond the good guy, bad guy? And that's where I think, I'd like to hear Evan a little more on the value chain management, because really what that implies is that we're no longer just in the security context. We're no longer in the bomb in the box or narcotics stash in the container. We're into this idea where the visibility of the entire supply chain and the sharing of data completely between public and private sectors will actually give us a chance to do things that we haven't been able to do before, both on the regulatory side with governments. But this value chain management gives private sector entities the ability not only to deal with the government properly, but to deal with its suppliers, to deal with its insurers, to deal with its bankers, in ways that have never been possible, but are now facilitated by AI and machine learning. This is the new world that we're on the verge of. And just to go back to your original question, the way to manage this information in ways that create new public-private partnerships and new partnerships among nations is just at the outset, and that's what that's the beacon that I think Altana's casting, into the future.
Yeah, and earlier this week I was going to mention, Alan, to your point, I saw a product announcement from Altana on LinkedIn when y'all streamed this information, which I thought was very interesting because my mindset was more like Altana helps very well. Again, we know Amy Morgan from Altana, and we've had her on the show, and in fact, she was our second show ever that we ever published on our podcast. But with her and Ana Hinojosa, but that was my mindset, and then of course the biggest visibility that we see of Altana in the trade shows are because you all are experts in identifying these supply chains and especially with forced labor. That's where we were. But then I saw this product announcement. And it goes beyond that, like you said, Alan. It's mostly understanding what that product is. So we're talking about, and it's very interesting that you say that, Alan, is that understanding. Oh no, I think Evan, you said it. I'm sorry. About does my product have the data behind my product? Does that determine, or can I now say it qualifies for a free trade agreement, for example, or carbon emissions, et cetera? It goes beyond that. So it's really interesting to see that. And what I saw on that announcement, and by the way, I'll put that link. I'm sure I know I revisited it and saw that. I saw that on LinkedIn. It's recorded and it's on there, I guess, forever unless you take it down. But I'll put a link on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn. I'm sorry. I'll put a link to the LinkedIn video and announcement on the show notes so anybody can reference that. It's really interesting. Y'all should go see it because it's really neat how you all showed how everything just ties together, and it's really graphical and really neat and viewing that end tier on your supply chain. So anyway, and I just want to make note of that because I do find that interesting, Ellen, that you said now. But okay, but let's go beyond that. So are you providing just data, or are you telling the client, hey, this does qualify for USMCA because of the rules and regulations and the tariff shifts and all that? I mean, I know we're going beyond just finding out the supply chain, but are you providing the data so that someone can then say, well, at least I know it's originating, at that point?
Yeah, we do a few things in combination that all add up to what we describe as value chain management. So the first step is you've got to create a real source of truth for every product value chain, right? So we take in the bill of materials, the supplier master data, and then through our AI platform and this whole global data footprint we built over the last 5.5 years, we're able to build out that multi-tier product-specific visibility off of the bill of materials. And then the platform now permits the enterprise customer or a broker on their behalf to reach into the value chain network, to verify it, to document it, and to build up a real source of truth, to curate a multi-tier view, and be ready for compliance attestations, right? So it's not just an outside in, here's some data. It's an inside out, this is my source of truth. So that's step one. You create that foundation. Step two is we overlay these different AI-driven lenses on the map, if you will. So some of those are around carbon, some of those are around forced labor, sanctions, free trade agreements, other participating government agencies that have to, this thing is flagging against this PGA requirement, that kind of thing. We now have an AI assistant that supports the compliance manager in HS classifications. So going off that whole product catalog, looking at the whole multi-tier value chain of the goods, the material composition, the origin of goods, and using all that context to assist in HS code classifications.
You just mentioned something that sounds like it is a much more in-depth application or module. So here's where I want to get it. The first traditional thing of AI in the compliance supply chain world has been automation of classification, taking your parts databases and whatever and auto classifying it and saying, whatever. And well, it's only 20% accurate. Well, now it's up to maybe 50% accurate. Well, that's still fine. If it's 50%, I'd take whatever. And if, this is accurate. Now I go on to the next thing. And it's improving my productivity. And as time goes on, it'll get smarter. Let's hope and improve the accuracy. But you just hit on something. All right. So I've got it. It's classified, the country of origin, all that. You're saying that module is going in deeper and looking to see, does it really qualify for these things? Or are there red flags back there to say, hey, this could be potential of tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 supplier might have some forced labor. Am I hearing that correctly?
You are. Yeah. So it's looking at that whole value chain. Think about it as like a parts database that goes back all the way multiple tiers and is, editable and documentable. So it's not just a kind of outside in view. It's a source of truth for the enterprise. And then you've got an AI assistant that can help you look at all those issues across the entire value chain.
Hey, to our listeners, hey, that is a game changer. You're right, Lalo. Folks, I got to tell you, this is something right here from a compliance standpoint. That right there is a more in-depth, powerful module that I've ever heard on the automated classification. Now, I may be getting blasted from some other companies, but that right there is really good. Now, that said, let me also say this to our listeners. This is something that as we're going through this and you hear what customs, what Evan is talking about and Alan has been saying, agencies are using this and using different sources and they're diving into tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 things, suppliers. They're looking at different supply chains, the carbon things, and then all that stuff. You need to be looking at it from your own internal company to see if you can be that effective and that productive in utilizing these modules. Because I'm telling you, folks, you can't do it through spreadsheets anymore. I mean, things have evolved well beyond. Alan, you mentioned it's like, yes, you guys wound up building and breaking the loggerjam and built a phenomenal clearance system when you were with customs that dealt with, finding the bad guys and processing all that information. Well, they have gotten smarter and things have gotten even more complex because some of the things we're talking about, and I guess Evan coming back, is looking at the characteristic of a product in a shipment. It empowers the clearance folks, if you will, that front line that is facilitating trade. But as it's dealing with all this and assessing it, we are actually having systems that can help deal with cultural problems in other parts of the world where there's forced labor. No, we're not going to support that. And guess what? We found an issue here that we would have never known before.
Yeah. I'll give you I'll give you, sort of a commercial and product response. And I think, Alan, you should speak to the policy trend here. But, on the commercial side of things, it's in the public record that our platform is also used by U.S. Customs and Border Protection to actually enforce these laws and deal with these trade facilitation kinds of concerns, right? So they use us to look into those multi-tier supply chains and meet their enforcement mission. And I think the opportunity here, one of the reasons we started the company and why we, back in the summer of 2018, I think caught Alan's attention and imagination when we were getting going with the company was we said, hey, there's an opportunity through this federated data architecture that we're going to build this company around to permit a shared view of the world between the regulator, the customs authority, and the trading community on the private sector without actually sharing and commingling all their data. So you can kind of have your cake and eat it too from a supply chain intelligence standpoint without having to share raw data outright. And so that's what we built the company around. And I'm hopeful in the next few months, we're going to be able to start talking about some work we're doing to connect the dots here between the public and private sectors. This is one of the key parts of our mission is to enable these trusted global value chains between the public and private sectors, between and among governments and, importers, the defense industrial base, the financial services community. So it's the power of getting all these, coalition of the willing participants into a common operating picture. So, Alan, maybe it makes sense to just kind of speak to the geopolitical and policy trends here.
Yeah. So the what Evan's talking about would have been dismissed outright even 10 years ago. The idea that we get benefits by sharing our data signal that we need to overcome and put aside. We take them into account, but we don't let them dominate the sovereignty, proprietary, and privacy concerns that have kept people from wanting to share their data, either or with their competitors, or even the friendliest of governments not wanting to share data. And this federated architecture permits. It's beautiful because it solves the problem of data sharing or data signal sharing in ways I think Evan can articulate, but it permits us to actually get to a point where we can create new forms of interaction, new forms of partnership. And Andy, from your experience, the private sector thinks CBP is overly bureaucratic, overly demanding, constantly changing, and all of that may be true. But I appreciate that, and I think you do too. The challenges that face regulators. But what this situation and the developments that Evans described permits is actually this idea of a trusted network. We move beyond the transactional dimension. It's not just, are you a trusted trader for this transaction, but rather it's a relationship that is sustained. And when policy, as it will, catches up with this phenomenon, you're going to see the kinds of interaction that permit exploiting that value chain management tool that Altana's developed. But there's always a lag in policy formulation. We're right in the middle of that now, but this is where the world is going. Sure as shooting.
You alluded to this. I think it's worth us just pulling on this thread where you were talking about how the forced labor issue, for example, from a policy standpoint, is a policy means by which the U.S. government is extending its jurisdiction beyond the border.
That's true.
That's the trend. That's where this is all going.
Well, this guy's smart, Alan. You very eloquently put that whole scenario as far as the government's reach on this, but it's like you're right. But here's the thing, I guess, to your point. I guess I look at my listeners and it's like, folks, if you're in the compliance area, this is one of these shows that you need to get your upper management to listen in on, your purchasing sourcing group and the other department heads, and listen in on this, because this is no longer everybody stays in their silo, do your job without crossing over. You've got to open this thing up. If you're going to be an effective company in today's world and minimizing your costs, maximizing your revenue opportunities and all of that, well, you're looking at sources, you're looking at, cycle times, you're looking at cost of goods, you're looking at the quality of the goods. All that's great, but you've got to look as a team beyond the borders and beyond that initial, hey, I got this now for, instead of 10 cents an item, it's now 5 cents an item. Well, if there's that big of a difference, well, you got to ask the question, hey, let me talk to if I'm in purchasing, let me talk to my compliance person. We got a great price on a product here. Do you see any red flags? That ought to be something you're doing. And most traditionally, that does not happen. Purchasing looks at bigger, better, faster, cheaper, and compliance goes, what the hell were they thinking? I got to cross the T's and dot the I's.
And one of the things that's so amazing is we've launched a value chain management system. Nobody in the organization has the title value chain manager, right? So by definition, these value chain issues are cross-functional. And we see that with our customers, we'll have trade compliance teams working with sustainability stakeholders, working with the sourcing team, working with the procurement teams and the category managers, the supplier managers. And increasingly, we're getting pulled over into finance and the insurance buyers. So these are all these kind of like multi-tier global value chain problem sets and use cases that by definition require that cross-functional engagement. And one of the really cool things that's happening with us, with our customers, is we're helping the trade compliance teams move beyond the kind of reactive, okay, now here's the procurement decisions we've made, go figure it out, go get these across the border and file the paperwork. We're helping them actually inject upstream strategically into the merchandising decisions and into the engineering and design decisions and into the supplier discovery and sourcing decisions. And we're starting to put a product experience around what we call value chain design. So imagine that you can, for this new product or for this new SKU or this new item I want to merchandise, I can look at the entire multi-tier value chain and then model the tariffs and duties. I can screen it for forced labor. I can have a picture of its carbon intensity, and I can look at the geopolitical considerations. A lot of these big C-suite initiatives are around China plus one, right? We want to nearshore, we want to create some resilience. So all of that intelligence can be driven by these trade compliance team members upstream in the sourcing and procurement processes. So you don't inherit these issues after the fact and have to work them out. You get to actually go in strategically and optimize and design for them up front.
Yeah, and just to build on that, this is the transition that has to take place not only in the corporate context, getting it up to the C-suite, because the problems are not in the boxes as they've been drawn on the organization chart, but this is a huge problem for CBP as well, because CBP still tends to look at itself at ports of entry as gatekeepers. And they're really, of course, they're gatekeepers, but this is going to be more of an analytical function than a straight police function going forward. And for the same reason that we need cultural and institutional change in the private sector, we need it in the public sector as well to adapt to the new technologies and the new policy dictates that are there. But the big thing, and Evan he'll smile when he hears me say this, because I've been saying it when I first met him, and he talked to me about a federated learning architecture in which you could share signal from data in a risk management context without actually commingling the data. And I said, if you can really demonstrate that to me, Evan and Peter and Rafat, who were there, I said, you will have achieved the Holy Grail. because that problem has kept us from sharing information from time immemorial. And you know what? I know. I think it'd be worth, and this has to get up to the C-suite as well, because people don't believe it in the system. They just don't believe you can do this. And the idea I should share my data with CBP, or I should share my data with a competitor, unheard of. And it takes a policy decision at the general counsel's office or up in the C-suite to change that. But this is a technology that people have to become aware of.
Alan, and I just want to do a quick time check. We do have 10 minutes left, but we may do a little bit of wrap up, and of course we're going to edit this part up. But I do want to ask one question, Alan. Recently, we, Global Training Center, my company that funds this podcast, did a training for a bunch of a very large group of CBP agents, auditors that enforce forced labor. Do you feel, or do you think that having access to this, so they came to us and said, help us understand what you, the importer, is facing, because we want to be more of a partner with the trade community versus just being the enforcer. We want to know why you're having that issue, that problem, et cetera. So having access to Altana, for example, does that, obviously it's going to bump up enforcement, right? I mean, because they'll know more about the data, but how is that like beneficial to the importer? I mean, obviously go get Altana, right? But besides that, how do you see that?
It permits the private sector entity to actually take corrective action. You get to the point where the problem is identified, and you start either correcting it if you can, or mitigating the impact on your supply chain. But this is also the challenge to CBP, so that, as Evan will tell you, Altana's been training thousands of CBP agents, or hundreds and hundreds of them, around the country on the platform. But it's a different element. This is the Office of Trade folks. You're dealing with the OFO, with the audit and review folks. And this is kind of the change within CBP that's got to take place. Although I'm delighted that, your auditors were asking, we just don't want to be cops. We'd like to know how we can assist here. But this is the kind of change within CBP that needs to take place, because this is this has got to become an intelligence-driven operation from start to finish.
Hey, to that point, and this is the other thing, again, I come back to our listeners, folks, this is one of the areas that, the audit folks, and I'm talking about from an accounting perspective to a compliance perspective to a legal perspective, when there are audits, and a lot of times everybody's so worried about the front end and then in the middle, and they're reacting to situations if they've not done things correctly. But the audit side of this needs to be brought in so they can see what's going on in your planning, your strategic plans, if you will, and vision and all. But then as they're doing their job, and they find some problems and red flags or some questions or whatever, that it can very quickly go back, instead of this traditional, let me write up a report, and you go through all this action of trying to do, action plans to respond to a report that now maybe 3 or 6 months old. It's like, no, man, you got to jump on this stuff quicker than 2 shakes of a dog's leg to get it done. Now, with that, I will also say some of the things you're talking about as far as folks getting in and as far as, working together. This is, Evan, I was liking what you were talking about, because to me, it's this collaboration. Again, I am a big proponent. You got to break down the silos. If you are in that C-suite, and here's something I want to ask for both of you and Alan, what should the C-suite folks be asking the questions of their down below? Because one of the things I guess I look at when you're collaborating, if you're allowing your silos to continue on Everybody's doing their own little thing. They're working hard. They're doing their things, but proverbially they're going to be the pooper scooper at the end of a parade instead of getting in front of this and feeding this beast and letting it go through. So when you're collaborating, you're on the front end of this. And that to me is where you're going to be, as a team working so efficiently rather than reacting to things. So to attain that with the AI technology type things and all, what is it that the C-suite leadership needs to be looking at doing for their company and their people down below to take advantage of this and get ahead of the ball game here, if you will, rather than reacting to it?
Yeah. So, the cheeky response is buy Altana, but the way that I tend to talk to C-suites and just position the problem set is in the 21st century to succeed in a global business, you need to be reorienting your business to manage networks across the value chain and not merely your customers or your suppliers, right? So we got to move beyond the direct buyer supplier relationship outsource paradigm. So the 21st century is going to start to look like virtual vertical integration. And the governments are making you do it. You have no choice. So it's not just what you should do, it's what you have to do. So the implication is that that not just network visibility, but that sort of network collaboration has to get baked into the organization and the ways of working and your business processes, right? So, compliance intelligence needs to be baked into the sourcing and procurement decision making, right? It needs to be part of your customer relationships and your marketing. If you're an intermediate chemical company or a forest products company and you're selling to all these, brands and retailers, they have their own compliance obligations on deforestation, on carbon, on forced labor, on everything else that's coming down the pike, these value chain shaped problems. And so part of serving your customers is being able to actually provide that network visibility to them, right? And being part of these collaborative multi-tier value chain networks that become trusted networks. So that's the C-suite pitch, is reorient your businesses around these value chain networks. And, you can do it in Altana, but there's, like I said, I don't want to make it an Altana-centric thing, but that's just the way the world's going.
Yeah, and just to that point, that's what a leader's supposed to recognize. I mean, when you say what's supposed to be driving the C-suite, they're supposed to be understanding these changes that are sweeping the world, the splintering of the World War II order, the end of the first phase of globalization and the beginning of another one. I mean, these are big, heavy notions, but that's what leaders are supposed to be able to grapple with. And the idea is, how is this affecting my organization? And how is it affecting the way we ought to see the way in which we do business? That's what's called for always, but particularly in a time of huge transformation.
Well, there are things that I have personally done with companies where, and this is something that I think comes into play here, where there is an executive that had the vision to say, you know what, let me pull together department heads under my umbrella across different things. If there are sister divisions that will willing to participate, that's great. But we've had meetings where somebody from IT, some compliance, from customer service, from accounts payable and accounts receivable, the legal side, the logistics and transportation side, and the sourcing and purchasing side, and whoever else is wanting to get in there, and pulled them together. And I was facilitating the discussion, and it had to have somebody sponsor it high enough up that it created enough, shall we say, interest and incentive of some of these middle management folks to say, okay, you know what, that executive's involved with it, I'm going to be there, because it, from a career perspective, whatever. I mean, you got to face it. That's some of the things that goes on. So if you're a leader and you're going through, they sponsored it, it came through. We had a meeting, and it started out, and we started talking about exceptions and what was going on in the different areas, and what do you do with the information I give you, the old quality process improvement type things. That would be paramount in looking at it, because one of the things, I guess, is that we're all suffering from deficiencies. Usually, if there's an exception, it's a deficiency of some kind of information. What do I do with it? I need to look something up. I don't know what this is, or I don't know where it goes, or I don't know where to charge it, and I can't do anything with it. Regardless, all that to say, as we go through and those people start talking about the exceptions, like, well, I have that information, but I can give it to you a little earlier. And what happens is people start buying into, hey, we have an opportunity to eliminate exceptions. It actually dramatically lowers costs. But here's the thing. Companies like Altana and this AI technology those are like some of the solutions, the tools of solutions to put forward to streamline processes, even streamline data flows, and make everybody involved much more productive. Have I got that kind of, what I'm looking at is I'm excited about what you guys are offering here.
Put your finger on the key thing, right? So we can show up with data, AI, and collaborative workflows for, internal and external stakeholders, but you still need the business transformation, and that still needs to be driven by executives.
Well, let me say this. We need to wrap this up for now, but I would love to have another show with y'all at some point to talk about what do you see in the next 2 to 5 years regarding the AI technology, regarding some of the geopolitical type things that are going on. Probably by the time we get to go through this, obviously we're in an election year, so either there's going to be a re-election of one president or a re-election of a former president, who knows, and all that kind of stuff. Then you have the new president of Mexico and what's going on there. And then you have the situation over in the Middle East, and then the China and Taiwan situation. Holy crap, I can't stand all this stuff. How in the world are you guys, from your perspective, managing through that? How are you setting yourselves with those crosswinds of all kinds of things going on? I think that would be a strategic discussion that would be worth going into in another show.
That'd be great. We could tell you, Andy, why the basic advice: hold on to your hat.
I love it. Okay, with that, I will say, guys, this has been a great discussion. We've just barely even scratched the surface, and I'm telling you, y'all are going to forget more than I'm going to get to learn on some of this, and you are so fantastic. I love both of you guys. You're just like, man, the knowledge, the wisdom y'all have is phenomenal. So
we appreciate the opportunity. This is really cool. Thank you.
Sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Well,
both.
folks, SimplyTrade, this is, we thank you so much for our SimplyTrade podcast listeners. Share this. Please be sure and share this. Subscribe to us. We really need you to do that, as well as reach out to Lalo and myself. Then there's Alan and Evan, and we'll have their contact information appropriately on our show notes. Reach out to us on LinkedIn. Reach out to us and make comments or whatever. And if you've got some questions that you'd love for us to ask these guys for the next go round, please hit us with that. But with that, Lalo, I'm going to turn it over to you to help close us out.
Yeah, well, we're done. I mean, I in respect of your time and everything, but thank you so much. But we did definitely talk to your team, and we're hoping to have you guys back on if we need to. But thank you very much, and we will have follow up and even the application itself. But thank you for your time, and hope to see you all and catch up to you maybe at a conference or two here in the future.
This was awesome. Thank you, guys. Nice to meet you.
Thank you very much for joining us. SimplyTrade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest in the show, or would like to sponsor SimplyTrade, or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at SimplyTradePod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. SimplyTrade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by SimplyTrade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situation. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.